All right. We got it. Got to go live here. Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. Yeah, it's working. Do we have our deck live yet? Some stuff going on as well. All right, there we go. AKA the Dragon, and welcome to an impromptu hotel in Chicago live stream of the Make for JC podcast. Almost forgot to even come to you this morning because I forgot to do an hour difference. I'm in Chicago. I was just walking down the hallway. I said, oh, wait a second, I think there's an hour difference. So good morning, everybody. Good to be here. I'm in Chicago, stuck here in Chicago. Definitely using all the tools in my belt. Here in Chicago, it was a great success. I brought books, but just blown by that thing, just doing all the interviews and stuff like that. But there's a huge snowstorm. On stage, and we're back. Okay, so folks on YouTube, if you can see me, please chime in and let me know. The universe just decided to add to the mix and make us lose our feed. So if you're on YouTube and you can see and hear me, please let me know in the chat. Say hi to great morning to everybody coming in on Substack. Great to see you. So what I was saying before is that I was here for my book launch for the Make Sense, How to Rewire Your Mind and Transform Your Life. And we did it at the Creative Con event. Jim Quick was there. The amazing John Lee was there. Richard Dolan, David Meltzer, and folks from Gary V's new company, Vive. Shout out to Andrea Sullivan and Jason Orsini. Just opportunity for me to like say, holy cow, I have a book and it's launched and it's out there. You can get it on Amazon. The feedback has been great. So, you know, for those of you that know me, and I just want to just quickly insert this, what matters most to me in life than anything in the world, even more than my health, is my children and my family. So when I go away, I'm not a big fan of going away. So when I go away, the best part of going away is coming home. I can't wait to get home, which is what I was supposed to do yesterday. So for those of you that are on the East Coast, you know, we're getting pounded by snow. I mean, like pounded. My wife just sent me videos. It's just like, she's like worried that there's going to be snow up the door, but we're supposed to get like over 2 feet of snow. So the whole flight canceling thing changes. There's a lot of people stuck here right now. So, you know, it's a great opportunity. We've been talking a lot about adversities and you know, struggles and setbacks and letdowns and inconveniences. We've been talking a lot about reframing them as opportunities to do what? Just like we have some people join us in our live streams and, you know, say mean things, or maybe somebody's saying mean things to you, or things are not going well in your life. But these are opportunities for us to look at the health status of our response system. You know, I teach the interface response system. So here I am saying, oh no, I can't get home. What am I going to do? And trying to navigate, like, where am I going to stay? I don't have a car here, all that stuff. But then I said, right, haven't made up my mind yet. I think, but so it turns out that it's going to be a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to rent a podcast studio and I'm going to interview some really cool people here that I've always wanted to have live interviews with. So anyway, turn water into wine, and all you got to do is change the way you look at things so that the things you look at begin to change, and they sure are. So definitely excited to get home, but I'm not going to get home until Wednesday. Flights are canceled. That's how big the snowstorm is. So great morning, everybody. Miss you, Graham. I see Leah is here. Who else is with us today? Just want to say hi. Tally Mindy, Assembly Women, Evelyn, Cheryl, Kateria, PM is here, Lindsay, John Ball. So great morning, everybody. Feel free to share this around. We're going to talk about an interesting topic today that sometimes flies under the radar. And by the way, normally what I do is I record the podcast studio, so I will redo this for the podcast, and that will go out on Friday. Hope you guys are loving the podcast. The podcast is just getting such great reviews. We were ranked number 5 in the world the other day, just on the same line with like Mel Robbins and Jamie Kern Lima and stuff like that. So it's been blowing me away, but it's due to the uniqueness of the podcast, but also that we've just been having killer guests on there. So hope you guys are liking that stuff. But today we're gonna take a different approach, which is very makes sense podcast-ish. The whole concept of my work is just to recognize that for the most part, we're not really doing as much thinking and perceiving as we think on our own, because we're running our conditioned programming, and that's the stuff that we got from our mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, evolution. We're unconsciously consuming. We talked about brain rot last week. We're consuming and consuming and consuming social media, news, good stuff, bad stuff, Olympics, terrorism, war, right? All of that stuff. And we think that we're being informed, but, the nature of forming habits and neural connections in our brain is very much so, through repetition. So I always say, protect your goals and your dreams in your mind. We're going to talk about the mind as a muscle today and an organism, by controlling what you consume. Whatever it is that you consume with regularity ends up being what we assume with regularity. So maybe that was a message that you needed to hear today. Just make an assessment of what you're consuming on a regular basis, not just the food and water, but the news and social media. This right now, you should only be here listening to this if it's something that enriches you and serves you and things like that. So we're going to talk about that, the metabolic health component. I came up with a well, I shouldn't say I came up with it. I came across, because I've been interviewing some really cool neuroscientists lately, and they're coming up. But I came across a concept called metabolic psychiatry, and we're going to talk about this today. So we know that right now what's trending is metabolic health, metabolic dysfunction. I'm a health coach, and I've been working in nutrition for so long. So it's fascinating to see all of the fast changing landscape of healthcare. But right now it's very much all about metabolic health, how well your body takes food and converts it into fuel for energy. And you guys know what metabolism is, right? A healthy metabolism is one where you eat food and it burns it and converts it into energy, right? So we're starting to see a lot of metabolic dysfunction, and it's not just about being overweight, right? Overweight is now a side effect of metabolic dysfunction. But we're going to take a little bit of a different approach today, because that's the way we do it here on the Make Sense podcast. We're going to talk about metabolic psychiatry today. So once again, I always welcome everybody to kind of chime in and join the conversation if we get into any sort of a back and forth, whether it's positive or negative, right? I'm like I said before, if somebody wants to yell at me or challenge me or something like that, as long as it's respectful, it's not like I'm looking for a challenge, but I know it doesn't always have to do with what I think it has to do. So if anything is valuable in coordination with this topic, it'll end up in the podcast. I like the fact that I don't have to worry about the podcast audio today because often stuff like that. We'll get a nice clean version of this episode. I want to say the official Hardy Bogle is here. And I see Cherish the Day 282. So we've got YouTube, we've got Substack, my two favorite platforms. So I will check back every now and then and check things out. But like I said, today I'm going to challenge everybody here to kind of stop treating your brain and your body as separate organisms. So just think about that idea. We're going to take the brain and the body, and we know that there's a mind-body connection, right? But we very often look at the brain and the body as two separate things. We're going to kind of like neural link those together today. So if you're struggling with something like brain fog or mood swings, or maybe even a lack of focus, I think we all resonate with that. The root cause, this is what we're going to entertain today. We're going to look at alternative vantage points and perspectives. That's what we're all about. So if you have brain fog, mood swings, or maybe a lack of focus, the root cause might not be a mental thing or only a mental thing. It actually might be, to the topic today, metabolic. So we're going to talk about nutrition and your metabolic health, but how it affects your brain, exercise as well. So in this episode, we're going to dive into something that I said is called metabolic psychiatry. And more importantly, how insulin resistance and mitochondrial health, we're going to geek out a little bit on that, dictates your emotional stability and your cognitive edge. The word cognition is really important for people to grasp right now because we're kind of offloading our cognition to technology right now, which is not necessarily a good thing. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But cognitive edge, to have a cognitive edge will mean that your brain is in support of you doing better at receiving and responding versus reacting, handling adversity and stuff like that. So if somebody comes at me or comes at you and you handle it well and you run it through the interface response system, if you guys get my book and you read it, like you actually read it and you come to the free masterminds that I do, it's going to change your life. It's going to arm and equip you with a new way of looking at things. But that would give you a cognitive edge. We're going to learn a framework also of something that we call metabolic synchronization. That's a good thing. And what that is that's going to be something that aligns your blood sugar, your lean muscle mass, your brain energy for total life control. What a cool concept. So we're going to explore things like the ketogenic, not just ketogenic diet, because I don't really like the word diet. We're going to look at ketogenic therapies, I guess we could say, for psychiatric outcomes. We're going to reference things from Dr. Wendy Suzuki. These are just the leading experts. Gabrielle Lyons, Dr. Peter Attia, who wrote the book Outlive. Outlive right now, in my opinion, is probably the premier book to kind of get your finger on the pulse of what's going on with health and what promotes longevity and things like that. And I promise you, you're going to learn a lot today, and it's going to arm and equip you with the awareness of a different approach to maximizing your health, but also we're talking about mental health. So today we're going to dive into this emerging field of what I call metabolic psychiatry. I'm not the only one that calls it that. I didn't come up with it. I found it. And why your brain energy metabolism. So your brain has a metabolism as well, right? Your brain energy metabolism might be the hidden thermostat controlling things like focus, mood, and emotional stability. So just park for a second there and realize that if you're experiencing any issues with your moods, mood swings, things like that, your focus or your emotional stability, emotional intelligence, if you're somebody that is like most people are experiencing emotional mismanagement, talk about some things that you can do to arm and equip and give that cognitive edge to your brain. wet piece of meat in your skull. So why this topic is so interesting to me, and I think is so relevant for the show, because if we don't talk about this topic, you might just get an idea and know something, but not really be able to execute on it because you're skipping a step. And that would be this metabolic psychiatry component. So for me, one of the core tenets of the Make Sense Academy, the entire Make Sense ecosystem, which is the podcast, these live streams, the book, the new book that just came out in our Make Sense Academy, and our masterminds and things like that. One of our core tenets that we use, and when you come into that, and we say it over and over, is this. We always say that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. And what that says is if you're out there doing a lot of things and not getting the results that you want, it very often is not necessarily that you're failing, right? Sometimes you're just in the part of things, in the part of the process where most people quit, but you just might not be the right version of yourself, the right person for the job yet, right? So we're going to talk about leveraging yourself to transform into a better version of yourself physically and mentally, right? Remember, those work together, so that you become the version of yourself that finds hard tasks easier, right? Things never get easy, but they get easier. And we're gonna have some fun today. And there's some really simple things that you can do. So this is often overlooked, this concept of our metabolic health, but more importantly, how it plays a huge role in who you are, right? When we say who I am, sometimes we only think mentally or what my identity is, but there's also the body, there's the physical, right? There's muscle, there's organs, there's fluids, there's chemistry, and all of that stuff. That stuff has a lot to do with who you are, right? And how well what you do works, right? A simple way to look at that is if you just start, a new eating program or going to the gym, right? You're not the right person for the job yet. You will be, but we have to evolve sometimes. So for those of you that don't know, because I very often just come across as the podcast guy, the dragon guy, but I've spent the past 20 years of my life coaching as a metabolic health coach. So I've been coaching in the realm of metabolic health. So am I an expert? No. But I've got a lot of experience, right? I also lost 80 pounds. So I have my own health journey. I lost 80 pounds 20 years ago and kept it off. And I've learned a lot. But that's not the only thing that I find interesting about this concept of metabolic psychiatry, the correlation between nutrition, exercise, and the brain. One thing that I can tell you happened when I went through my health transformation, and if you guys have experienced this, feel free to chime in, but I gained mental clarity. I never knew that by losing weight and eating healthy and establishing some healthy habits, that I would see things clearer. I would handle adversity better. And that was a big part of me reclaiming control of my life, right? Because I started to recognize that very few things in life that we control, right? But what we put in our mouths and what we drink and what comes out of our mouths and response is fully in our control. So we have to become control freaks. We have to start learning how to control the controllables on all aspects. So one of the things that we teach in the interface response system in phase 3 called process is we just make a simple evaluation of the dichotomy of control. It's a Stoic principle. What is in my control and what is not? We should always look to allow ourselves to release from things that are not in our control. So this is a very, very fascinating thing for me because I was very, very much aware that my brain got clearer as a result of me getting healthy and eating healthy and losing weight. So let's make sense of this. So for years, I said this before, we've kind of treated the brain and the body as separate systems. The mental health over here, so we've got mental health, right? We go get treated for mental health and address mental health. And then there's metabolic or physical health over here, right? We kind of like quarantine them as separate things. And we know that they're connected, but we address them separately. But the science is beginning to tell us a very different story about that stuff. So this emerging field, you've heard it many times now, of metabolic psychiatry suggests this. So funny, I'm in here. I'm definitely not at home right now because I can hear people through the wall here And then I hear the heater. Thank God for the heater. It just came on. So we are on the road here. So this emerging field of metabolic psychiatry suggests that many mental disorders. Now, I'm not a therapist. My wife would kill me for this, but my wife is a therapist. But many mental disorders, such as things like depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and even ADHD, these are very popular, disorders, keyword may, also involve impaired brain energy metabolism. So what we're saying here is if your brain's metabolic health is off, often that's correlated with some of those proliferations of those symptoms that we just talked about. So we're not here to diagnose, we're not here to prove anything, we're just here to simply look at something that could play a big role, at least in the severity of some of those things. But if you don't have or struggle with any of those things, you definitely have mood swings every now and then. You definitely get happy and sad and all of that stuff. So this will help that, because if your mood swings are affecting your response system, well, this stuff is pretty important, isn't it? So in other words, your brain might not be flawed or broken. Sometimes people feel like that. I know my buddy Jim Quick had an actual brain injury when he was younger, so he's known as the boy with the broken brain. But not everybody has that story. A lot of people just think that their brain doesn't work. It might not be flawed or broken. It might just be underpowered and undernourished. So we're going to talk about nourishing your brain. There's brain food out there, but there's also some healthy habits. So one term that researchers use, and there's going to be some terms here, and you can either write them down or not, but obviously they'll come out in the transcriptions and stuff like that. But there's one term used called cerebral glucose hypometabolism. Cerebral glucose hypometabolism. And it means this: the brain isn't effectively using glucose, which is a primary component of a lot of the stuff that we eat. It's not using glucose efficiently as fuel. Right? So that's cerebral glucose hypometabolism. Your brain's metabolism is hypo. It's not doing it efficiently. And there's something that we really need to understand about the way that the brain and the body works. If your brain cannot efficiently convert food and fuel, or we call it fuel, but convert what you eat into what's called ATP. Does anybody know what ATP is? It stands for adenosine triphosphate, which is the primary energy currency of all living cells. So if you don't have an ATP production, right, that's what we're talking about here, or you have a decrease or a limited amount of ATP production, then you're going to be struggling. You're going to be struggling with all of the cells in your body that are so essential. So ATP is the primary energy currency of all living cells, which transports chemical energy within cells for things like metabolism, muscle contraction. We all need this, right? You might overlook this and say, oh, my body will take care of that. But remember, if you're missing a couple of steps, your body's only taking care of it to the degree it can. And how does this affect everything we talk about on the show? Who you are determines how well what you do works. We're talking about the who right now. So this transports chemical energy within cells for metabolism, muscle contraction, and signaling, right? Your emotional stability, things like that. Your focus, your executive function begins to degrade if you have a decreased production of ATP. That's what we got to know, okay? So that's not philosophy, by the way. That's like science and energy physics right there. That's not something that's hypothetical. This is real. This is real stuff. You want to see what my coffee looks like today? The place is not open yet downstairs. That is a hotel coffee right there. Have you ever seen a hotel coffee or anything that looks more like a hotel coffee before? It's a little bit terrible coffee, but I'm a coffee guy. So let me be clear about something. Here's my little disclaimer before we get into this a little bit more. I'm not a psychiatrist by no means, right? I'm not diagnosing anyone here. I'm actually a doctor of chiropractic and a coach, and I have a degree in nutrition and 20 years as a metabolic health coach. So I've got a lot of say and experience in this. I'm a geek about neuroscience. I'm a neuroscience student. I'm working towards getting a degree in that. But by no means am I an expert, right? I'm just super fascinated by human behavior and specifically behavioral shifts in myself and in others that I'm looking to help through my book and the ecosystem. I've experienced and I've seen behavioral shifts, and I've witnessed, what happens to them, like I said before, when my metabolism improves. So what I'm saying right now is if you guys go on a run to improve your metabolic health right now, a lot of the things that you think you have problems with will get better. And it's not a hypothetical. It will actually happen. So a lot of people are thinking about eating healthier or losing weight, and that's a physical thing. I just want you to recognize that it plays a huge role, and there's science and peer-reviewed stuff at the wazoo to prove that. So maybe that's something else. My biggest fear, I don't know if anybody else out there has this fear, is things like Alzheimer's and dementia, to lose my faculties. So when I eat healthy, for me, it's not all about my body. It's actually more about mine now, because I've learned this stuff. That's what I'm sharing with you. So when I lost 80 pounds and restored my metabolic health back then, which was not the goal, right? That's just something that happened because I followed through. What happened, and I shared this with you, is not something that I was prepared for. My mental fog began to lift. Not just my mood, but my mental clarity. My emotional reactivity decreased. This idea of flying off the handle, putting my foot in my mouth, which I used to always do. I used to live in that space because I had no control over my conditioned reaction. I used to let it run the show, right? It stopped, or it started to decrease. I stopped forgetting things. I remember the first time I noticed when I was getting healthy, I stopped forgetting my keys. I don't know if anybody out there forgets their keys when they walk out to the car and you don't realize till you get to the car. You get so frustrated. I started realizing that I wasn't forgetting little things like that, my car keys, But then I started remembering people's names as well. I started remembering and recalling things that I did with people. And I started, a big part of my book is I go back and retrace a lot of the things that happened, childhood traumas and stuff like that. If your brain is not functioning and firing off, it's very hard to do that stuff. You'll see in chapter 2, we talk about the lifeline. And if somebody is unhealthy and they read my book, they'll have trouble understanding it. And keep in mind, we have all of this social media and gaming, and we're delving out the cognitive load of our brains to AI and stuff like that. So we have an issue here. This is an important topic. My mental fog started to lift, right? My emotional reactivity decreased. That was a big, big thing. And if you're somebody that follows my work and you're reading my book and you listen to the podcast, I talk a lot about perception, right? And the interface response system. That's a big, big part of it. You'll get that in the book. There's this moment where we learn how to say, and pause. What are we pausing? Our knee-jerk conditioned programmed response. We're not saying we're not going to listen to it. We're just pausing it and stepping in a space where we're going to think. We're going to reclaim control of our thinking. That's pretty much the essence, the flagship program of the book. But that moment where we pause and we widen the gap, we step into this space between the stimulus, what's happening, which sometimes is just evaluating our own thoughts, and our reaction, because we move from reacting to responding, you're going to understand why all this that we're talking about matters. So let's just talk a little bit about the chemistry. We're going to talk about insulin resistance and mental health right now. How important is this? Well, it might be important to you. It's very, very important, but some people might just block this out. But I just want to make sure it's in here. When insulin signaling is impaired, what's insulin signaling, right? It's the body signaling the need for insulin, right? And regulation of insulin. But when it's impaired, inflammation rises. So a lot of people struggle with inflammation, right? mitochondrial efficiency drops. We're going to talk about mitochondria today. This is a very, very big word in metabolic health and metabolic synchronization and stuff like this. This is going on in your body, and it has a lot to do with why people, you see some certain people age faster than others. Their stem cells and their mitochondrial function is starting to go dormant faster because of what we're talking about today. So you can take back control of that stuff. But when insulin signaling is impaired, inflammation rises, mitochondrial efficiency and blood sugar swings become more dramatic. So how many people do you know have blood sugar issues? And guess what suffers first when those things happen? When insulin signaling is impaired, right? The brain. The brain suffers first. So a lot of people out there are experiencing metabolic dysfunction, but not in a physical way. They're getting mood swings. They're getting cognitive fatigue. They're getting low motivation, irritability, and anxiety spikes. I remember when I was 80 pounds overweight, I had a lot more anxiety. Does anybody relate to that? So what if, think about this. What if some cases of depression, I've struggled quite a bit with depression, and I know a lot of people do. What if some cases of depression aren't just serotonin problems, and we learn a lot about that in the world of depression. What if they're energy problems? What if there's something more simple in that mix that we actually have control over? What if it's also about energy? Some of them, of course, could be like this. Some of them could be, diagnosed in a different way. But that's what metabolic psychiatry is asking and talking about. It's about using the component of things like exercise and hydration and nutrition to fuel the brain. And very often what we see as a side effect, I mean, we can't make this claim, but I can promise you, if you get healthy and you start working on your metabolic health, it's going to help. It might not cure something, but it's going to be better, right? So if you're into chasing better in life and living longer and having a better quality of life, this is a foolproof way to do that. And interventions like ketogenic diets, there's that diet word again, for things like bipolar disorder, that's being studied right now. So people with bipolar disorder, right? The research is now showing that people that are getting ketones or producing ketones from things like a ketogenic diet, and there's so many different ones, that's being studied now, not just for weight loss, right? But as an alternative fuel efficiency therapy for the brain. Think about that. So ketones actually provide a more stable, efficient energy substrate for the brain when glucose metabolism is impaired. Okay, so ketones may provide a more stable efficiency energy substrate for the brain when glucose metabolism is impaired. So what we're saying there, and I don't know if it came out the right way, but if your metabolism is impaired, you're going to lack the ability to do something that is good for you. Okay, it's real simple. Now, if you're in a place right now, this is a little bit of a disclaimer where you just don't give a shit, right? You're just like, hey, we're not going to live forever, and which is true, right? And you're just like, have a little bit of fun and whatever. You're listening to the voices of your programming conditioned mind and your ego and things like that, which I've spent most of my life doing. I get it. And this is probably not an episode that you're enjoying too much because it's kind of like highlighting some things that you don't care about. But if you're into the idea of enjoying the time that you have more, living longer, but quality life, and making improvements and developing new brain cells rather than just losing them, rather than just taking back 5 years of your life and enjoying the time that you have now, this is important. So let's talk about mitochondrial health and your mood, okay? So every thought that you have in your brain, a lot of people don't know this, every thought that you have in your brain requires that ATP, that adenosine triphosphate, right? And where does that come from? The mitochondria. I'm going to just explain really simply what mitochondria is, because a lot of people are not taking care of their mitochondria. So we're saying that every thought that you have requires ATP production, and that's coming from the mitochondria. So real simple, mitochondria are just tiny little structures inside nearly all of the cells in your body. And there's like gazillions of cells in your body. And these little mitochondria act as microscopic power plants. It's like soil that produces more cells, cell proliferation, right? So mitochondria are like little microscopic power plants. They take the food that we eat. That's how we fuel them, by the way, right? It takes the food that we eat and the oxygen that we breathe, and it converts them into usable ATP. That's that ATP. What is ATP important for? Thinking, right? And all of that stuff. ATP is like essential. So we're just looking at like maybe fat, right? Maybe my issue is that I don't have efficient ATP production, right? So it comes from the food we eat, the oxygen, and it produces usable ATP, which ends up fueling everything that your body does, everything. So if you're crashing at the end of the day or you're having mood swings, it could be an ATP issue, right? Probably is to a certain or a large degree. So everything that your body does, from thinking to moving to repairing and creating new cells. A lot of people struggle with how fast they bounce back from getting sick or even from an injury. ATP production, right? That's all about the cells that are required for all of those functions. If it's not efficient, you're going to take longer than other people. We saw this happen in COVID, by the way. So I'm not here to make big statements and get people all pissed off. What I'm here to say is this is something that you can change, and it is a game changer. You will have a much better life experience if you play with this. So mitochondrial dysfunction, right, which is a dysfunction of what we were just talking about, this proliferation of cells and production of ADP. So mitochondria dysfunction has now been linked to depression and bipolar disease. So that is fact. Go look it up. Google it. Look for peer-reviewed journals on the correlation between mitochondrial dysfunction, because we're going to talk about how to improve our mitochondria, right? And bipolar disorder and depression. I'll even say that to my wife. I don't know if she's here. So let's zoom out for a second. We got to be a little bit hardcore with science there. What improves mitochondrial function? And I just want you to see that these are things that are 100% in your control. You want to improve your mitochondrial function? Exercise, okay? Muscle building, specifically lean muscle mass, and also muscle sustaining. So one of the greatest breakthroughs that ever happened with weight loss, but it's a double-edged sword, is all this GLP stuff. It's shutting off the food noise. It doesn't cause weight loss, but it's helping people not eat so much, right? But what's the downside of it? They're getting muscle wasting, right? They're getting sarcopenia. So muscle building, specifically lean muscle mass, is producing, right, mitochondria, is improving mitochondrial function. So what's happening to people that are having muscle wasting because they're just losing weight and they're not doing anything about it? Nourishing. Their mitochondria is going down. That's a big problem. So you're going to see, in correlation with people doing those drugs the wrong way, you're going to see increased things like increased dementia and Alzheimer's, not because of the drugs, because of things that they're not doing. Because if you do this right, if you're taking those meds, but you do it right, and you're exercising, you're building lean muscle mass, and you're nourishing your body the right way, rather than just saying, hey, I don't want to eat anymore, so I'm just going to have a cheeseburger and that's it. Also, stable blood sugar, sleep, reduced inflammation. These things improve mitochondrial function. Do you give a shit about this? Right? I hope you do. I hope you do, because it's very rare that we have elements that improve our lives that we are in control of. Most of the things in life we're not in control of. Shit happens, right? But how we respond to this shit happening and what we put in our mouth, how we move our body, all of that stuff. It's not easy, right? It gets easier, but this is all about improving mitochondrial function. So you're starting to see the pattern. So let's talk quickly about something called muscle-centric medicine. Muscle-centric medicine for the purpose of improving cognition. So this is where we hear from people like Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, who I did an event with in San Diego. She's amazing. She's just a specimen. But also Peter Attia, who wrote the book Outlive. Great book. If you want to get up on what's going on with health and nutrition and how to improve your longevity, it's all about lean muscle mass. Dr. Attia's book, Outlive, is great. But they emphasize muscle as the organ connected with longevity. And there's all the science is pointing towards this right now. You know, if you want to assess how long you're going to live, they're saying, look at your grip strength and your leg strength and things like that. And that is correlated to how long you're going to live, right? That's why we should be caring about this. That's why I'm putting this in the Make Sense podcast, is because this is, if you don't do this, everything else I teach you is not going to work, or it's going to be inefficient, right? It's who you are that determines how well what you do works. We're going back to the who before the clarity before action. So muscle, they say, is not cosmetic tissue. And that's the way the world looks at it. It's part of a metabolic engine. Your muscle is part of your metabolism. And a lot of people don't see that. And that is why we don't see everybody working out and everybody just like, you know, we have skinny fat people now. Obesity is not the problem. Metabolic health is the problem. So the muscle as a metabolic engine improves insulin sensitivity. Exercise does this. It regulates glucose. It lowers inflammation. It drives mitochondrial biogenesis, right? That's the process by which your body creates new mitochondria inside of the cells, which does what? Produces usable ATP and more cells, risen heat, and the aging process. Guys, this is the cutting edge science, by the way, that has some of the leading experts saying that there's a chance that 5 years from now, we'll figure out how to have people live to like 150 or even like 500 years old. That's what the literature is saying. You could think that that's crazy, but that is a reality, maybe for our kids or their kids' kids. Okay, and this is the area, the mitochondrial proliferation. So here's the phrase that I want to kind of like sit with you today. I hope you take this phrase with you. You don't necessarily need to know what it is, but kind of like, I'm going to give you a generalization, but it's that muscle-centric medicine for cognition. So I just want you to remember how we're saying that working your muscles, protecting lean muscle mass, building lean muscle mass is correlated to longevity, but it's also directly correlated to cognition, your brain working better, okay? So if muscle regulates metabolic stability and metabolic stability regulates brain energy, then lean muscle mass becomes what's known as a cognitive asset. If you have lean muscle mass on your body, it is good for your brain. If you're weak, and by the way, everybody has a starting point. If you have no lean muscle mass, and you can do an in-body scan, right? It's going to affect your longevity, but it's also going to be directly correlated to your brain function. This is big stuff right here, guys, and it's 100% within our control. So in 2026, this is, you know, pay attention. In 2026, in this AI-driven world where cognitive efficiency is currency, right? It's like you're either losing your currency or not. Optimizing your biological hardware may be your ultimate advantage right now. That's a competitive advantage in the workforce right now, to up your cognitive and biological hardware. So AI can think faster than us. It can, okay? But it cannot think for you if your brain is inflamed and underfueled, right? AI cannot be the new brain. It can't take over the cognitive load of the brain, because when we work our brains and when we think and we wrestle with ideas and stuff like that, that actually makes our brain stronger. If we delegate that out and pass that cognitive load on to technology, we've got a big problem. Houston, we have a problem. So neuroplasticity, right? We know that term. I have an amazing interview coming up. It'll probably drop in like 2-3 weeks with Dr. Wendy Suzuki, who's the dean at NYU, and she's a neuroscientist. But her research, and this is fascinating. You can go look her up. She was on one of the most viewed podcast episodes with Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. Great episode there if you can't wait. But her research in exercise-induced neuroplasticity shows that physical movement stimulates neurogenesis. Physical movement stimulates the production of new brain cells. If you're going to the gym, how do you feel after the gym? You might be tired, but how do you feel up here? You feel great. And she says the reason why you feel that way is because you're proliferating new brain cells, neurogenesis, right? And bathing your brain with what she calls a neurochemical bubble bath, And that's, you're bathing your brain when you exercise with things like dopamine, which you love, right? Serotonin and growth factors. So if you're getting dopamine hits from social media and likes, stuff like that, you're getting the same dopamine hit times 10 when you go to the gym. Am I right? Anybody here exercise and feel depressed after you exercise? You might be depressed about like how you're not good at it yet, but how does your brain feel when you get that neurochemical bubble bath? Come on, let's hear it. So let's move on. So that's neuroplasticity, right? Through metabolic repair. So we're actually enhancing neuroplasticity and brain cell development through exercise. So movement doesn't just burn calories, my friends. It rebuilds cognition. There's nothing more important right now. I'm even going to say that exercise is more important than nutrition. It shouldn't replace it. You need them both. But right now, all of the data is saying that exercise is directly correlated with longevity. If you look at somebody that is in good health and they're in their 90s, I promise you they're moving. Okay, so movement doesn't just burn calories. It gives us a whole new meaning to the move it or lose it concept, doesn't it? So let's talk about this concept of metabolic synchronization. We're almost there. So I want to share something that we've introduced recently into our community. And I just have tons and tons of clients that, weight loss clients, nutrition clients. We have this amazing goof-proof program. That's the one that I did 20 years ago. So if anybody out there is listening to this and they're looking for something that they can just in a very, very easy way start off, reach out to me and just say, hey, I'd love to learn about your program or your community. We've just got a huge community of people that are just crushing their health goals. But we're talking about brain health, right? So in our community, we've inserted this new concept called metabolic synchronization because education is important too, right? So the metabolic synchronization framework is what we're talking about here. That is when all things are firing off and working together. And that might just start by somebody that wants to lose weight, but when they do our program and they do it the right way, they get these results. So it's the idea that when people follow our simple program or a program that kind of covers all those bases, they're basically fueling their body, every 2 to 3 hours a day with macronutrient footprint. That's really important. So we provide with these simple goof on the go, like nutrient dense snack, like what we call fuelings, right? So what happens when they do that, even if they're just weight, their blood sugar stabilizes. Oh, that's cool. My doctor said my blood sugar is more stable. They also protect 98% of their lean muscle mass. Remember, a big problem today with weight loss is people are losing muscle mass, which you now know is directly correlated to brain cognition. Okay, so on our program and with this type of a protocol, 98% lean muscle mass is preserved. Sleep cycles become more aligned. Sleep plays a big role in this too. And mitochondrial energy production is efficient. And now with exercise, it's enhanced as well. And you know what happens to inflammation? It lowers. So your body and your behavior begin to synchronize. That's what metabolic synchronization is. Focus stabilizes, reactivity softens, decision-making sharpens, and you stop fighting your chemistry. Park that for a second. What does that mean to you, to fight your chemistry, right? If you synchronize your brain and your body and your chemistry, everything works in coordination with one another. It's like a team. It's like a symphony. Everything works together, and that is a much better life experience. And that's the difference between living reactively and what I always say on the show, which is typically a self-development thing, but now we're going on the biological and molecular level, and right, we're talking about metabolic health. But that's the difference between living reactively and becoming what we always say is the dominant force and shot caller of your life. It's not just a shift of perspective. We're now looking at our perspective is not just connected and controlled by our hippocampus and our brain and all of that stuff. It's actually directly controlled and coordinated with the body as well. And there's something that you can do about it. There's something that you can do about it right now. And if anybody needs help, I personally coach these people. Just reach out to me. It's not something that I do for money anymore. It's something that I just will never stop doing because it's a huge piece. It's me paying forward something that cracked the code for me. So that's the difference between living reactively and becoming the shot caller and dominant force of your life. So it's a shift. It's not just a shift in perspective. It's a shift in the perspective shifting machine, the body. The perspective shifting machine is the brain and the body. Make sense? So here's a reality check for 2026, and we're almost there. Burnout is on the rise. Right? We're entering an economy or an economy right now. Think about this. Take a look at this. We're entering an economy now that's driven by high level thinking and creativity and resilience. You gotta know how to work with AI and all of that stuff, or else it's just gonna pass you by, unless you want to live in the woods, which I've thought about doing, right? So burnout's on the rise. So we are now outsourcing cognitive function to AI because professional output and efficiency are becoming increasingly more mentally demanding. So you have to keep up. So we're starting to use AI and technology just to keep up. So here's the uncomfortable question. If your internal biological climate, right, your inflammation, insulin resistance, mitochondrial health, if all those things are unstable because of everything we talked about, how well and how long can you sustain what some people call elite output? How are you going to keep up? Whether you have ChatGPT or not, how are you going to keep up? Okay, so metabolic health becomes biosustainability. I wonder if anybody gives a shit about this topic. I'm thinking about that right now. I don't think I would have when I was not practicing all these things. But the person that's watching or listening to this episode that is taking their health seriously and feeling these things and saying, "Oh, that's what it is," you guys love this stuff. If you're kind of sitting on the sidelines and you don't give a shit, like I've spent most of my life, try to give a shit about something in it. Right, because it's just so powerful. So we know that large language models like, ChatGPT and Claude are learning as we input. You notice how they're learning about you and stuff like that. Do you know your brain works the same way, right? And with the right fuel and metabolic psychiatry that we've been talking about, it will work better. So can you see that your internal ecosystem determines your long-term cognitive resilience? So why are we looking at our brains like ChatGPT? It might not be as efficient, but our brains grow and learn. We create new brain cells. That's kind of but ChatGPT could give a crap. ChatGPT doesn't have metabolic health. Maybe they have like AI metabolic health or something like that. But this is about reclaiming your mental control, your agency. So if the brain is an energy system and energy systems depend on metabolic inputs, then reclaiming mental energy begins with biological repair. I hope that this is landing for someone. I hope even just one person. Our podcast gets 600 plus thousand downloads a month. I hope one person that listens to this takes action and reaches out to me and says, my life is beginning to change. I was blind, but now I see, right? So this is not about abs or aesthetics, guys. Exercise. This is about brain energy metabolism, insulin resistance, mental health, mitochondrial biogenesis, and mood changes, right? Lean muscle for brain health, neuroplasticity through metabolic repair. Guys, go to the gym. You're going to get smarter and more resilient, and you're going to procrastinate less. All of that stuff, all the data is there. Start really small. Start really small. And ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to reclaim authorship of our life. And that's what the whole Make Sense ecosystem is about. Because when your chemistry stabilizes, your perception begins to shift. Wayne Dyer always says that it's our second tenet in the Make Sense ecosystem. When you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at change. Everybody loves that, but they struggle to execute on it. Okay? But when your chemistry stabilizes, your perception shifts. That's how you do it. And you got to practice. Perception shifts, guess what happens? Your life shifts. So that's all I have for you today. Remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. I'm so happy that I was able to come to you even from this little hotel room in Chicago. I hope to get home to see my chicken. That's my wife and my daughter. I'm at a place in my life right now where I don't like being away from my family. There was a time where I thought that I needed my own personal time, and I used to travel and do humanitarian work and all that stuff. But oh man, I'm like a dying, wilting plant when I'm not with my family. So I can't wait to get home if they're watching this. But I love and appreciate you all. Kalpana, thank you for that. Let's see who else is here. Alexi says, I care about sustainability because it's indigenous, right? It's a cultural thing, right? Great thing from our Kringle. Hey folks, if you're one of the inner circle, you're on Substack and you're one of the paid members, I'd love to know about the daily signal that I'm putting out there. And if you're not reading them, oh my God, just for $8 a month, you're getting an email every single day. So just let me know what you guys think about that. I like to think that my paid membership in Substack is by far the most valuable one. There's no bullshit there. You're going to get something every day to start your day. So I'd love to hear about that. Lindsay, great news for me because I've got the exercise part down. So Lindsay, how do you feel after you exercise? How do you feel after you exercise? So if you guys want to join the inner circle, it's $8 a month, or it's even cheaper if you pay per year. But I'm leveling that up. There's more stuff coming. For those of you that bought my book is available on Amazon. Makes sense, right? It's yellow, glasses and all that stuff. If you buy the book, please let me know. I never know who bought the book. I see all these people buying the book, but I don't know who bought the book. But we're having a monthly mastermind and a book club to help people go through the book, learn the interface response system, make the distinctions and put it into play. I'm doing a free monthly mastermind for everybody that buys the book. So it's going to be a big crowd, but you're going to be able to interact with me, interact with each other. We're going to build a community. So if you buy the book, all you have to do is let me know through whatever channel you're communicating with me, and I'll send you a link to submit your proof of your book purchase, or just put a code in there that I give you, and you guys will get access to that mastermind. So let's see, Midwest Lifestyle, definitely care, appreciate the amazing information, and look forward to catching more of your video later today. Awesome, Midwest Lifestyle. Let's see, who else? Oh man, I love all these people. Last Man Standing, you are a teacher. Thanks, tell my mom that. Liz Bishop, hey Liz Bishop. Thinking of supplementing with, I just lost that. NMN or NAD. These are great avenues to go down, right? Make sure that you get the basics done first, right? The basic macronutrients and things like that. And then if you've got that, you've got the exercise component down, then start looking at supplementation, and always speak to the person that, is your support team member and stuff like that. I don't like to give too much nutritional advice on here. So Liz, you know who to call. Last Man Standing, recently heard of cholesterol needs, right? Cholesterol is changing quite a bit. Last Man Standing, right? When I was young, everything about cholesterol was bad. Now we're seeing research that says that very healthy people have high cholesterol in a good way. Let's see. All right. Wow. A lot of people were here today. And we'll go just quickly to, we see some, YouTube is a cult, says Cherish the Day. I don't know if you're still here, Cherish the Day, but what do you mean by that? I mean, I'm going to do an episode where we're going to deep dive on cults. You know, every one of us is in a cult. It's just a matter of whether or not you think it's a cult, right? Look up the biometrics of what a cult is. You know, we've just got this idea that cults are like, you know, bad things because we hear about like David Koresh and all that stuff. But if you look at the metrics that make up a cult, we're all in a cult. It could be a religion, it could be a political concept, it could be a cultural thing, right? Cultural, right? Anyway, love and appreciate you all. Oh, the date of the mastermind, Liz, it's going to be on the second Tuesday. It's free, so got nothing to lose. But I'm going to run them for like a whole year on the second Tuesday of every month. So when you let me know that you get the book, you'll sign up for it. You don't have to come to it. You're not going to get like tons of emails or anything like that. But you're just going to sign in. That's how you'll get the Zoom link. I just want to prevent, because then there's a lot of people that like to, you know, they're not there to learn and stuff like that. They just learn. They just want to create controversy, which I love, by the way. But in that environment, you know, that's the one place that we won't have time for that, because we're just going to meet for an hour once every month. So love and appreciate you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And I'm going to back to being in a hotel. Bye-bye.